As people make their way into the room and get oriented, I want to welcome you to the CTCL virtual days, this session here. Thank you for joining us. A few housekeeping announcements before we get started. You can use the Q&A button on your screen to type out your questions to our presenters at any time. So take advantage of that, but you don't have to wait till the end. Just ask those questions anytime you'd like using the Q&A button. Your cameras and microphones are off, so you can get comfortable, be as relaxed and groovy as you want. Panelists cannot see or hear you. So just relax and get all this great information coming up. This is just one of many different sessions happening, so be sure to sign up for additional ones at the same place that you signed up for this one. And this presentation is being recorded and will be available within about a week at the same website that you registered as well. All the housekeeping stuff's out of the way now, so I will get out of the way and hand it over to Rachel.
All right, thanks so much, Russ. I'm going to share my screen really quickly. So welcome, everyone. We're so glad that you could join us for this Colleges That Change Lives overview today, and also hopefully that you've joined us for our info sessions with the Colleges That Change Lives colleges throughout these 4 days where we are meeting together. I hope you're already learning a lot and that you'll continue to learn a lot about these unique collegiate experiences that you may not have heard of as we continue to move forward. So during this particular session, we're going to focus on talking about how to take some of the stress out of your college search process. We're also going to talk about why the liberal arts continue to be important and relevant to students. And we're going to talk about why a Colleges That Change Lives institution might be a good fit for you or for your student. As Russ said earlier, we are using the Q&A box. I have a colleague, Lydia, who is answering those questions, both typing in the box, and then at the end of the presentation, we're going to save a little bit of time for Q&A. So as you have questions, if things come up, if there's things you want to know more about, drop them in the Q&A box and we will make sure that we get those answered. But we're going to go ahead and jump right in. And to get started, I'm going to introduce you to me a little bit, the person who's up in the corner of the screen. My name is Rachel West. I am a member of the Colleges That Change Lives Board of Directors from the college side. I'm an Associate Director of Admission at Agnes Scott College. We are one of the CTCL schools. We're located in Decatur, Georgia, right outside of Atlanta. And I use she, her, hers pronouns. And before I can really talk about your college search process, I probably need to tell you a little bit about what mine looked like. So just for some background on me, I grew up in rural Tennessee, northeast of Knoxville, and I went to a very low-income rural high school that sort of encompassed an entire county of students. We had about an average number of students who attended post-secondary education, and of those students, the majority went to a handful of specific schools within Tennessee. My own college process, I knew a couple of things up front. I knew that my parents were only going to let me go so far. I had a certain hour radius that they requested that I stay inside. I knew that I wanted a small school. My high school was fairly large, and I knew that I did better in my smaller classes. So I knew that I wanted smaller class sizes. And I also knew that I wanted an experience that was different from my high school. So I was looking at colleges that were maybe a little bit outside what my classmates were looking at. In fact, I considered it a bonus if I was the only one applying to that school. However, it did not limit it down enough. There were still too many colleges on my list when I was trying to search. And so my parents really asked me to sort of look into maybe academic programs that I was interested in. Unfortunately, I didn't really know what academic programs I was interested in. So I decided to pick physics engineering because I liked math, I liked science, and I looked specifically for schools that have those programs. I ended up at Center College in Danville, Kentucky, which is a Colleges That Change Lives school. It turned out to be a very good thing for me personally that I went to a liberal arts college because, as you might have guessed, I did not go into physics and engineering. I ended up going into English and International Studies, and because I was at a liberal arts college, I was able to make that switch relatively easily. It was kind of a winding road and a windy process for me to get there. And that is the way that it is for most people. There is unfortunately no magic wand that makes the college search process easier. That said, my goal for today is to sort of walk through some helpful ways that you can guide your college search while also thinking about what it means to sort of go to a liberal arts college or university or focus in on your interest in that way. But before we even get there, I want to start with the elephant in the room, so to say. So how will COVID-19 change your college search? It already has in many ways because you're sitting here on this presentation virtually instead of going to it in person as we would normally be doing. So I want to talk about a couple of things that people generally are having anxiety about in the college search process related to COVID-19. So for example, one thing to keep in mind is that your high school transcript may look different than it would have in the past. When everything sort of really hit ahead in March of this year, schools did different things. Some stopped instruction in March. Some didn't as they normally would do with grades. Some did pass-fail grades. Some did a mixture of things. So just know that if your transcript looks a little different than it normally would look, that is happening to students all across the country, and college admission counselors are ready for that. We also know that your ability to take or maybe retake standardized tests is very limited right now. So the SAT, the ACT, it is difficult for students to get to testing sites. They're very limited. Students are having to drive long ways in order to be able to take those tests. In some locations, they're canceled altogether and it's impossible to take them. So I just want to address that one a little bit. From the CTCL side, 42 of our CTCL member institutions are test optional. And actually 26 of them were before this year even happened. That means that you do not have to take those tests to be able to be admitted. 2 of our member institutions are test blind, which means if you don't send them, we won't look at them. And it's not just CTCL. 2/3 of institutions in the United States have gone test optional this year, either fully or temporarily. And it is likely that more will go test optional as it continues to be difficult for students to take those tests. So I just want you to keep that in mind, that there are options for you if you do not have the test scores at all, or the test scores that you would like. It is not the end all be all. Do not sacrifice your health in any way to be able to take standardized tests. Another great thing is that schools have really enhanced what they're offering virtually. You can take virtual tours, you can talk to students, you can talk to faculty all online, which are options that honestly didn't exist prior to this year. It's ways that you can really get to know college campuses without spending the money to visit their campus. And that is fantastic. You do have to seek out those opportunities and take advantage of them, however. I know that we're all getting a little bit tired of being on Zoom, but unfortunately, that is just the way that the college search process is going this year. So I really encourage you to take advantage of these opportunities, especially opportunities where you can talk to students and professors to learn what it would be like to be a student at a particular institution. And I also want to talk about 2 things that students frequently say. Students have talked to me a lot about being anxious because they think of it as a hole in their resume. They started doing virtual classes in March, and extracurricular activities, events, competitions, things that they were going to do at the end of their junior year just didn't happen. And that is really a thing that people are really anxious about right now. And what I want you to know is that in general, one thing that colleges want to know about you is how well you deal with challenges. It's why one of the big essay topics that everyone knows about is the essay that talks about what challenges have you overcome. This is a big challenge, and it's something that we're all going through together. So we want to know how you overcame that challenge. Maybe you did something really cool while you were working from home. Maybe you learned a new language, or maybe you learned the dance moves to every single K-pop video you could get your hands on. And know this too, we're all there in the same place. I am currently at home. I have been working from home since March. So we all are going through this together, and all admission counselors are going to know where you were in this college process, and they're going to be looking for that context in your application. So I want you to kind of take a step back from some of that anxiety and focus in on finding good fit schools, knowing that those schools are going to take into account everything that's going on this year. So now that we've sort of got that out of the way, I want to take a step back and talk a little bit more about starting your college search process. So by being here, you've already started, and I love that. But if you're looking at your college search process, and if you're anything like me, even when I was sort of in my college search process, I was looking at schools, I was making a list of where to apply. It was very hard for me to limit it down. There are a lot of schools in the United States. There are over 5,300 four-year colleges and universities of some kind in the United States. So it can be very hard to know about all of them to figure out which one's a good fit for you. So there are a couple of things you might be thinking. You might be thinking that you should be looking at rankings. The most popular are the US News and World Report rankings. Maybe you should be looking at schools that are top ranked there. Maybe you should be looking specifically at Ivy schools. Maybe you're thinking you should look at schools that you've heard of because of a sports conference, your SEC or your Pac-10 schools. I grew up in SEC country. I know what that's like. Maybe you're thinking you should be looking at the big school in your area, the university of, the big public institution that a lot of students go to. And you're wondering how you break out of that. What other institutions are there outside of those? Maybe you're also thinking about return on investment. You're thinking, I'm going to be spending money. I have to spend money to go to college. How do I know that I'm going to be successful after I graduate? How do I figure that out? Maybe you're looking at the list of CTCL schools and you're wondering if those schools are too small for you. Maybe you're a STEM student and you're thinking, can I do science at a liberal arts college? Is it as good? Maybe you're my personal favorite, looking at liberal arts schools and thinking those schools are only for liberals. And maybe you're looking at the list and you haven't really heard of any of our colleges that change lives schools before. And you're thinking, no one has heard of these schools ever. No one ever. And I totally empathize with that. When I was looking at schools and told a friend that I was applying to Center College, she told me that Center was a direction, not a college, which I take offense to. So I just want you to know that these are perfectly valid things to be thinking. But today I'm going to break those down a little bit and talk about some other ways in which you can approach your college search process. And actually where I want to start is that rankings list that I mentioned earlier, the US News and World Report rankings. You may know a little bit about this. It's one of the biggest ranking systems for colleges in the United States. And it is perfectly natural that we want to rank things, right? We give stars to everything. We rank things on Amazon and in Yelp and Rotten Tomatoes and our Lyft driver and all of these sorts of things. But the important thing to keep in mind about the US News and World Report rankings is they rank colleges in a lot of different categories. And it's not really obvious how that ranking came to be. So I actually want to break that down a little bit. So if you look at US News and World Report ranking, 20% of the ranking comes from peer assessment. So what that means is the college president of another university thinks about that specific college. 20% of it is about faculty resources. So what resources do faculty have available to do research and teach? 10% is about student excellence, and that is specifically incoming student excellence, not current student excellence. So about 7.75% are test scores, and 2.25% are high school class rank. So that's what feeds into student excellence. About 10% are financial resources. That is not financial aid available. That is how much money a college has in the bank. 8% is graduation rate performance. How does your graduation rate stack up against other schools' graduation rate? 5% is about alumni giving. Do alums give back to the college monetarily? 22% is about graduation and retention rate. Do students stay from first year to sophomore year, from second to third year? And how long does it take students to graduate? And 5% is about social mobility. So do students who attend this college end up in a higher socioeconomic bracket than they were in before they started attending based on their job? So that is what makes up the rankings. And I think it's important when you're looking at these rankings that you decide, are these the most important things to you? Do you see other factors that you wish were considered? Do you wish it was weighted differently? These are all important things to think about if you're looking at the US News and World Report rankings. And actually, that's why I want to bring up a different tool, which is the Gallup-Purdue Index. So this is a report that was released in 2015 that did a survey of over 30,000 college graduates from across the United States who have a bachelor's degree or higher. And what they were really asking was, what were their perceptions of their undergraduate experience? And how did they think the things that they did in their undergraduate experience related to their current well-being and quality of life? So the big question they were trying to answer was, is college worth it? Which is an incredibly broad question. I'm sure you can agree. So here is how they defined that question. They looked at 5 areas of well-being. So these areas were what they call purpose well-being, which is, do you like what you do every day and are you motivated to achieve your goals? Social well-being, so do you have strong and supportive relationships in your life? Financial well-being, so are you able to effectively manage your economic life so you have reduced stress and increased security? Community well-being, so you have a sense of engagement in the area where you live. Do you like where you live? Do you feel safe? Do you have pride in your community? And physical well-being, do you have good health and enough energy to get things done on a daily basis? So I think you can agree that's a pretty broad, well-rounded way to look at well-being. And the Gallup-Purdue Index looked at, asked graduates a lot of these questions and asked how their experiences in their undergraduate institution directly affected how these areas of well-being, or directly affected these areas of well-being in their current day. And here's what they found. The type of school alumni went to, public or private, small or large, very selective or less selective, was far less likely to be related to the quality of alumni's lives after they graduated than specific experiences they had in college. So in other words, it wasn't where they went, it's what they did while they were there. So if that is true, if it's important what they did while they were there, what was it that was important? So here's what they found. The odds of these survey respondents strongly agreeing that their education was worth the cost were 1.9 times higher if they thought their professors cared about them as a person, or if they had a mentor who encouraged them to pursue their goals and dreams. Was 1.8 times higher if they had a professor who made them excited about learning. 1.6 times higher if they worked on a project that took a semester or more to complete. 1.6 times higher if they were extremely active in extracurricular activities and organizations. 1.5 times higher if they had an internship or job that allowed them to really apply what they were learning in the classroom. 1.4 times higher if they had a leadership position, and 1.2 times higher if they had a paid job or internship. These are the things that the survey respondents across the board rated as most important to their current health and well-being. And one thing that I really want to point out is that if you look at these look at these items and then look at the things that small liberal arts colleges and specifically CTCL member institutions are known for, you're going to see a lot of crossover. So this is a way in which you can kind of determine, I should look for colleges and institutions that allow me to have these experiences in my undergraduate experience. Another way that you might look at this is through the National Survey of Student Engagement, or NSSE, as it is affectionately called. So this is a survey of four-year colleges and universities, and they actually survey students in the first year and in the senior year. And what they're trying to figure out is how students spend their time and what they gain from attending college. So what they come up with through these results are what they call confirmed good practices, things that they say across the board are desired outcomes and that lead to desired outcomes for students if they have them in their undergraduate experience. So those break down into what they call engagement indicator themes. So one way to look at these are to think about some of the questions you might ask. So academic challenge. What's the classroom environment like? Are you in lectures? Are you in seminar, discussion-based classes? Are you having hands-on learning? Are students asked to really build on what they've learned before, to build on classes that they've taken before? So learning with peers, is there an emphasis on group work and collaboration? Are there a variety of perspectives available? Is the campus diverse in racial, geographic, gender identity, political, socioeconomic terms across the board? Experiences with faculty. Do you get to engage with faculty, or are you learning from TAs or graduate assistants? Are you able to do research and independent studies with professors? And the campus environment. Are students encouraged to engage with one another outside the classroom? Are there appropriate levels of support, whether that's academic or personal support? And then they also identified 6 high impact practices, things that they found across the board really impact students in a positive way. And those are service learning, learning communities, research with faculty, internship or field experiences, study abroad, and culminating senior experiences. So these are questions and things that you might look for when you're looking at different colleges and institutions. Does the institution you're looking at offer these 6 high impact practices? How do they answer those questions? And what is available to students from the 4 engagement indicator themes? I also want to talk about a couple of other important outcomes, specifically in terms of achievement. So Fulbright scholarships, if you haven't heard of Fulbright, it is a scholarship program that offers research, study, and teaching opportunities across the globe, over 140 countries, to recent graduates. It's a very prestigious award. For our CTCL colleges in the last year, 42 students from CTCL schools were selected as Fulbright scholars. 26 of our member institutions were cited as top producers in 2019. Watson Fellows are 1-year grants that are given for independent exploration outside the United States. There were 6 of those in 2018 from CTCL schools. Gilman Scholars are grants that give students that have lower socioeconomic means the financial grant to study abroad or intern abroad. And 32 Gilman Scholars were from CTCL schools in the 2018-2019 year. And in 2020, 3 of the top producers of Peace Corps volunteers were colleges that change lives schools, meaning those students really value giving back to their community. So why does this matter? Why did I just go through all of those lists, all of these different ways in which you can learn about colleges and universities? The reason really is that I think the thing that we all frequently hear about colleges and universities is when people don't get in. What we read stories about are people who, schools that reject more people than they accept, schools that have a less than 5% acceptance rate, a less than 2% acceptance rate. But that is just truly not the reality at most colleges and universities. For most CTCL member institutions, liberal arts colleges, other colleges and universities in the country, we're inclusive in admission. So the average admissions rate at CTCL schools is 65%. The national average for 4-year colleges and universities is 65%. So the reality is you're in the driver's seat. It's not really a question of will I get in. There are wonderful schools that are going to be a great fit for you that you will get into. So it's really about how can I use some of the tools and metrics that are available to me to guide my college search. And what I want you to remember from that is that quote from earlier, it's not about where you go, it's about what you do while you're there. So a couple of questions you might think about asking of an institution to help you figure out whether it's a good fit for you. So you might talk about professors. Do students think professors care about their students? Is mentoring valued? How does the school talk about mentoring? Who helps you figure out what classes you should take, what career you want to go into, what internships you want to do? Who's doing the teaching? Are faculty excited to teach undergrads, or is it really focused on graduate assistants teaching undergrads? How do you do long-term collaborative work? Do you have the opportunity to work with faculty on research and independent studies? And is that available to a lot of people or just to a very select few? When do you get to start that? In your first year, or is it reserved for senior year? Do students get involved on campus? Do they get involved in the local community? How is the school seen in the city that it's in? How does the school support internships? How do they help you find them and attain them? Are there opportunities for leadership, and not just for the student who is the leader of everything? We all know the student from high school who is the president of 50 clubs. If you don't know that student, congratulations, it's probably you. But we want to make sure that there's leadership opportunities available for everyone. Does the school have fraternities and sororities? How do they factor into campus life? Are you particularly interested in Greek life? And how many students do a paid internship or have a job? How do they balance that with their academic responsibilities. So these are just a few things that you might think about when thinking about different institutions. So now I want to walk back to that question that I asked earlier about return on investment. How do I know that the money I spend on an education is going to prepare me for the future? So liberal arts education is really focused on education for your entire lifetime. It's focused on skills that will prepare you for the jobs of the future and jobs that don't even exist yet. I'm sure any parents on the call can think about jobs that didn't exist when they were in high school. And so you can't learn them from a major, but you can learn the skills that's going to help you to be successful. So liberal arts education is really grounded in ideas of learning about creative thinking, collaborative work, working with a team, interdisciplinary thinking. Can you approach a problem both from sort of an analytical perspective, but also from an analysis perspective? Leadership and the ability to follow. Can you lead in a group? Can you step up and take the lead and help others? And also, do you know when to step back and listen? Communication skills, whether that's in person, in writing, one-on-one, small group, large group presentations, whatever it looks like. Data analysis, do you know how to understand a group of numbers and make them make sense? Complex problem solving, can you look at a problem and figure out how to break it down to come up with a solution? These are the things that are focused on heavily in a liberal arts education, but they're not the only, but they are not just skills that you're going to learn for yourself, but they're also the skills that employers want. So the Association of American Colleges and Universities surveyed employers to ask them where they thought emphasis should be put for college education, what they thought students should be learning in college. And what they came up with was at the top, critical thinking and analytical reasoning, complex problem solving, written and oral communication, application of knowledge and skills in real world settings, organization, evaluation of information from multiple sources, and innovation and creativity. As you can probably tell, a lot of crossover with the skills that you are going to be learning in liberal arts environments. But not only do employers want this to be taught at a collegiate level, but these are the skills that are most important to them when hiring. So the Committee for Economic Development came out with this chart that shows the top 5 things that employers are looking for that they consider essential when they're hiring someone. And what came up was teamwork, collaboration, problem solving, working with others of diverse backgrounds, critical thinking, oral communication. These all came up even higher than specific skills knowledge. So they considered these 5 skills higher than knowing how to use the software that is specifically used for that job. So keep in mind, these are the things that you are going to learn at a liberal arts institution. And you're going to have a long-term return on investment. So it's not just about your first job or getting into grad school. It's about what happens to you 20 years down the line, 40 years down the line. So the Georgetown University Center on Education and the Workforce actually just came out with this study, which is a long-range study where they looked at students who attended liberal arts institutions. And what they found was the median return on investment of liberal arts colleges is nearly $200,000 higher than the median for all colleges. And they found that the 40-year median return on investment of liberal arts colleges is close and actually higher to those of 4-year engineering and tech-related schools and 4-year business and management schools. So it's really about setting students up for the future and making sure that you are set as you move forward throughout your lifetime. While we're talking about money, I also want to talk a little bit about financial aid, because I think one of the most common misconceptions about liberal arts institutions is that they're too expensive. That you look at the sticker price and it's a big number and you get a little bit of sticker shock. So I want to talk a little bit about financial aid. We won't spend too long on it, but just a few things to keep in mind if you're new to financial aid. There are a lot of different forms that you may be asked to fill out. There's the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA, that's federal student aid through the United States government. That's the most common. There's also something called the CSS profile, which is through the College Board. A school might ask for that to get more specific information. Some schools have their own institutional aid form that they would ask you to fill out. And then some schools utilize an international student financial aid application. These are all different forms of that can help you attain financial aid. So there are some other aid opportunities as well. There's state financial aid if you're applying to schools within your state. That can be merit-based or need-based. I also want to give a little plug for outside scholarships. They're a great way to fill gaps. Start early looking for those and look broadly for them. So just to sort of keep in mind, there are two different kinds of financial aid that you need to be thinking about. There's gift aid, and this is aid that you do not have to pay back. So that includes scholarships, so whether that's merit-based, talent-based, whatever that is, and grants. So federal and state grants or institutional grants, financial aid given to you by the college. And then there's self-help aid. So that includes things like work study. You're granted work study by the federal government. You work a job as a part of your financial aid package, and student loans, money that you borrow to help pay for an institution. 44 institutions and colleges that change lives means there's 44 different policies for financial aid. And it's very important to keep in mind that in financial aid, deadlines matter. So if you're a spreadsheet kind of person, if you're a Post-it note kind of person, whatever works best for you, as you're looking at schools, go ahead and make sure that you're keeping track of admission and financial aid deadlines so you can get the most possible financial aid. A couple of other things to keep in mind. One of the most commonly asked questions that I get is, how can I get a full ride to Agnes Scott College? How can I get a full ride to another school? And that is unfortunately not common. Less than 100 schools nationwide meet full need. So it's important to keep in mind that you're going to be looking at financial aid packages across the board. You should also keep in mind that the students that receive the best financial aid packages tend to be the students that are above average academically. Institutional priorities really can affect how the aid is distributed. There's also going to be an impact based on COVID-19. So if you're filling out the FAFSA, that uses 2019 taxes, the taxes you just filled out. But as we all know, COVID-19, 2020 problem. So you may have to work with the institutions that you're working with to make sure that your financial aid package actually reflects the current reality. But what I want you to keep in mind is that financial aid and scholarships at liberal arts colleges tend to be able to be more generous. And liberal arts colleges and CTCL schools are able to offer very competitive packages. So don't get sort of sticker shock, give yourself a chance. You never know how that is going to turn out. So we've walked through the college search process. We've talked about a lot of different things. I want to end by talking about colleges that change lives, who we are, what we do, how we can help you. So we are a nonprofit organization. Our mission statement is that we're dedicated to the advancement and support of student-centered college admissions process. We support the goal of each student finding a college that develops a lifelong love of learning and provides the foundation for a successful and fulfilling life beyond college. That is who we are. Historically, in 1996, Lauren Pope, who is a writer for the New York Times, published his first version of the Colleges That Change Lives book, 40 Schools That Will Change the Way You Think About Colleges, writing specifically about schools that were less heard of, weren't really being talked about, but that provided students with strong outcomes and success. In 1998, the first collaborative work was done by the colleges. A couple of the colleges got together to do a college fair. In 2006, Lauren Pope did his last revision of the CTCL book, and the CTCL nonprofit was established. In 2012, the final revision of the book by Hilary Mantel Oswald was done, that it added 4 colleges, made our number 44. That is actually the last revision that has been done. We do not know if another one is going to come out, so it may be the final and definitive version of Colleges That Change Lives. In 2018, Bard College, which was the last of the colleges that have been profiled, joined us. And in 2020 is where we are currently. We're all learning to do things a little bit differently. So what it is that we do, we try to push back on some of the media frenzy about college admissions, about students not getting in. It seems like the only stories we read in the news are about the students who got in nowhere or who got into 100 places. So we want to push some of that frenzy back to be able to help de-stress students and families. Part of that is seeing beyond the rankings, seeing how a school is a good fit for you. Talking about the benefits of a liberal arts education, like what we've done today, and supporting the recruitment effort of our member colleges, helping you find these 44 diamonds in the rough that might be a good fit for you. So of those member colleges, hopefully you've gone to a couple of information sessions so far, and you will continue to do so throughout the next few days. We have 44 colleges and universities, 42 of them are private, 2 are public. We represent 25 states, so across the country, and all relatively small. The average enrollment at the colleges are 1,520 students. You can see the full list of schools up there. We believe that each of these institutions provides unique offerings to students that have different ways that help students think about how they learn. All of them are incredibly valuable. They're all going to be the best fit for one student. So I'm going to mention a couple of cool programs. I cannot mention a cool program at every college. I don't have time. I wish I did. We have colleges like Hampshire and Evergreen, which let students mold their education by creating a major instead of having a list that they declare. We have Cornell, which does one class at a time, which actually many schools have sort of adopted as a response to COVID-19. We have Goucher, which requires all students to study abroad. We have St. John's College, whose curriculum is made up entirely of different books that you're going to read. We have an all-women's college, Agnes Scott. We also have an all-men's college in Wabash. Very rare, there's only 3 4-year all-men's colleges left in the United States. We have 2 public colleges, New College and Evergreen State. The majority of schools that have athletics are Division III, but we do have 1 Division I school, St. Mary's College of California, and 2 Division II, Hillsdale and Eckerd College. So there is something for everyone in this list, and I really hope, as I said, that you're going to join us for these information sessions to take advantage of learning about these wonderful colleges. So I've sped through it. I've given you all of the information. It is not everything that I could give you. If you wanted to have a couple of hours talk about liberal arts and why it's important, I would always be happy to do that. But should you have any questions, should you need contact information, my name is Rachel West. My email address is on the screen. Lydia, who has been manning the Q&A, her email address is also on the screen. You can also always reach out to Colleges That Change Lives as an organization. We have a website on the screen that has an awesome feature to search all of our member colleges, where you can search for specific academic programs or things that you're interested in. You can also follow us on social media to learn more about all of the different member colleges, as well as learn about events like this one. So that is it. We have hit the end of my presentation, and we have just about 8 minutes or so to answer some questions. So Lydia, you want to come on and we'll answer any questions that have come through. And if you have a question that you haven't submitted yet, go ahead and drop it in that Q&A box right now.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. So my name is Lydia, and I'm currently the Director of Admissions Outreach at Clark University, but I've also worked at Reed College, another CTCL school, which you talked about athletics. Reed is a school with no varsity athletics if you're not an athlete. So we had a couple questions come in. The first one I think is really helpful to students no matter where you end up in your college search process, but often we pride ourselves as small liberal arts colleges on students being able to get to know faculty and faculty being able to learn from students. But what are some ways that that actually happens? How do students get to know faculty?
That is a fantastic question. And I say anything we answer in this way is going to be a generalization of what we know of the CTCL schools. But I do want to encourage you to look at those virtual options at schools, because I think that's a great question that you would also want to ask a student that attends one of those schools. How did they get to know their professors? But I think one of the simplest ways is that because most of our institutions are small, most of our classes are small. Average class sizes are low, so professors know every student in their classrooms. Most CTCL schools have a strong culture of advising, so faculty are working as advisors and mentors to students individually. Would you add anything to that, Lydia?
Yeah, office hours. If you don't know what those are yet, it's basically when your professor leaves the door open and says, stop by anytime, attend them. Often I think as a college student, I thought that I had to have a relationship with my professor before I could do that. And it took me actually a few years to realize that by going to office hours, that's how I was going to build the relationship. So it was backwards from what I thought.
Yeah.
So another question. So this is a student who really values being around smart peers who work really hard academically. Oftentimes this feels like when you're looking at colleges, the acceptance rate for that school feels like it's unattainable. So how do the CTCL schools combat this? And I would combine this with another question that I had, which is just, why are CTCL schools different from other liberal arts colleges?
Yeah, no, I think both great questions. I think I'll start with sort of the, smart students, lower acceptance rate, that sort of thing. One of the things that I think you have to keep in mind about schools that have significantly lower acceptance rates in general is they're getting a lot of students apply. And so what they're doing is something called shaping the class. And so what that means is there are students that do not get into those institutions who are incredibly smart, hardworking students, but they maybe didn't get in because that institution already has two tuba players from Illinois that they're admitting, and they didn't want to admit a third one. So that is the reality of shaping a class. And so you are going to be surrounded by smart, hardworking students at schools. Particularly one way to figure that out is by asking students on campus or at a campus about their values and about the things that are important to a campus community. And that's how you're going to find students that you're going to fit in with from that perspective. Lydia, would you add anything to that?
Sure. I think to the part about how CTCL schools might differ from other liberal arts colleges, I think they were identified by Lauren Pope for a very specific reason, which was that you could still get in. This was many, many years ago before we hit the under 10% acceptance rate. And Lauren Pope already saw, as the education editor for the New York Times, that we were headed nowhere good in terms of the media around college admissions. And so the idea that there were these schools that really had the exact same outcome as the school that might accept 14%. You're going to have the exact same career prospects, chance at happiness, lifelong curiosity afterwards, all of those things. But we're a little bit more reasonable on students, maybe because they were slightly lesser known at the time, maybe because they took a risk on a different type of student. There's a lot of different reasons why that was. But I do think that that makes CTCL schools different. I think once they were identified for that reason, there's a lot of desire to stay ethical in the field and to be schools that open more doors than close doors. And so that's a commitment that we all have. That's a little bit different than some of the peer schools whom some of us compete with.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That might be it for questions, Rachel.
All right. Well, it actually works very well because we are approaching our ending time. I want to thank you all again for joining us and for learning about CTCL. We have a number, I think we have several more presentations this afternoon as well as tomorrow and the next day. Presentations by specific schools, but also some presentations put together by by different college admissions counselors from different CTCL schools on topics like acing a college admissions interview and things like that. So I would really highly recommend those. If you aren't able to attend them, the recordings will be going up on StriveScan. So I would encourage you to look at those as well and see if you can fit those in. And as I said before, all of our contact information up on the screen. Reach out to us if you had a question, you didn't get it in the Q&A box. Send us a quick email. We're always happy to answer those questions.
Thanks, everybody.
I want to echo what Rachel and Lydia said about thanking you for joining us for this session. When you close your window, there will be a link to a very quick 4-question survey. We'd appreciate any feedback you can provide. Also, as mentioned by Rachel, this is just one of many sessions being hosted, so be sure to sign up for additional ones at the same place you signed up for this one. And in about a week, you'll be able to find this session's recording as well as all of the other session recordings at the StriveScan website. Also, I believe it'll be at ctcl.org/presentations. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you to the presenters for presenting, and have a great rest of your afternoon/evening.